Good morning. It is about 9:30 in the morning here in Israel, in the Jerusalem foothills, in the forest near Torah and Yishi. Can you hear the birds? Can you hear the horseback riders who are approaching? This, I think, is going to be the last of the CoronaTrails short videos. It is now the eve of Shavuot, the eve of Pentecost, the holiday of the giving of the Torah and the holiday of weeks, which follows 7 weeks exactly after our holiday and festival of liberation, of freedom from Egypt. Yes, I'm enjoying the horseback riders who are passing through, and I hope you are also. I wanted to share a quick thought about Shavuot as we go into it, and if you're Jewish, and if you're not Jewish, you may appreciate these reflections, which are based on traditional sources, as I think most of my philosophical meanderings are, whether on these CoronaTrails short videos or in my book, My Israel Trail. But they're still relatively informal ideas that I'm happy to share with you. So in very brief, 2 thoughts or 3 thoughts about the structure and the meaning of Shavuot, of this festival of weeks, this commemoration and celebration of the giving of the Torah. Number 1, if you close your eyes and listen to this silence, to the birds, and of course they stop their chirping when I'm quiet. You can imagine yourself on the top of Mount Sinai, which of course is in the desert, which I've had occasion to speak about with some frequency. The silence of the desert, the expansiveness, the kind of overwhelming sense of our position in the universe. Wherever you are, whether in the desert or a forest or in synagogue or at home, meditating out on your own on a hilltop, you can and we are meant to re-experience, reimagine, and commemorate the giving of the Torah by receiving it again, re-receiving, by every year renewing our acceptance of the Torah. And what does that mean? That means renewing our acceptance of the moral and behavioral and philosophical and principled elements of the Torah, leading us to understand how to live a good life, a life full of blessing, a life full of happiness, satisfaction and joy, and also a life full of meaning, and a life full of giving to others, and fulfilling those commandments which are so basic, not just the 10 commandments, but all of the commandments of the Torah. But I want you to understand something else. Alone in a hilltop, or here in a forest, or in a synagogue, or wherever you might be, accepting upon ourselves once again the Torah means accepting a very important element of the personal nature of that revelation, the personal nature of the fact that God spoke to the people of Israel, each in their own language, each in their own understanding. And that's a traditional concept of not so much language as literally the revelation coming into each of us in a way that we could accept and appreciate it. I'm not going into the details of what is a right or wrong, traditional and normative way to observe specific mitzvot of the Torah. I'm talking about the concept that we have very, very strong in our tradition, that there are 70 faces to the Torah. There are 70 ways of understanding, which is another way of saying there are myriad ways. There are innumerable ways. And each of us come to the Torah with our own sense of perspective and understanding and meaning. So if you sit quietly and imagine being there on Mount Sinai, you might be able to hear that still small voice that the prophet Elijah heard, also on Mount Sinai. That God was not in the wind, and he was not in the thunder or the lightning, but a still small voice that speaks to us from the silence of the deserts and the forests, and the silence of our own souls. And each of us, I think, in this Shavuot can and should reconfirm and rededicate ourselves to living in the best way we can, living out our understanding of those commandments of the Torah, to be a good person, to keep Shabbat, to keep kashrut, or not, within the context of our own understanding of what God requires from us, whether we be Jewish or whether we not be, or even not believing in God. We can still use this weekend, this opportunity, to rededicate ourselves to our own principles of what it means to be a mensch, to be a good person, to be a moral person, and not least in this age of Corona, where we are all suffering, where we all are facing our own challenges, and perhaps this can give us some sense of not just acceptance and humility, but certainly to build within us a gratitude for those blessings that are in our life, and to fill our lives with meaning and a sense of purpose, to live out those precepts of the Torah, which are so very basic, which have to do with living life to its fullest, and as Hillel said, to do unto others as we want to be done to us, and as the Torah itself says, to treat our neighbor, our brother, as we would wish to be treated ourselves. Chag Sameach, Chag Shavuot Sameach. I think, as I said, this will be my last CoronaTrails video, because we are now no longer really restricted in the same way we have been these last few months. I wish you a wonderful weekend and Shabbat Shalom. This is my Israel Trail.